Welcome back. Before we get into this, let me give you the first part of the super secret code is the number 0. You got me? The number 0. One more time, number 0. So, what affects how a rock will weather, how fast it will weather, where it will weather? So the most important factors are, surface area, how much of the rock is exposed. More if it's exposed, more if it's going to weather. Time, how long have processes been eating at this rock to break it down? What is the rock made out of? Some rocks are harder and more resistant to breaking down, weathering. Some are a little bit softer and more easier to break down, more easier to weather. Climate, the climate, temperature, rainfall is probably the most important factor when it comes to weathering. Temperature and rainfall, number one. Again, main factor in weathering. It affects weathering in two primary ways. Chemical weathering is more prevalent in warm, wet, tropical climates. It occurs very quickly and extends to great depths. Whereas mechanical weathering is more prevalent in cold, drier regions. Think frost wedging, exfoliation, things of that nature. So, warm and wet, cold and dry are really two big factors that drive weathering. So kind of knowing a little bit about the temperature of a climate in general, is it hot or cold? And knowing the amount of rainfall in an area, is it wet and humid or dry? You can figure out quite easily, well, not maybe easily, but you can kind of figure out, well, what kind of weathering be most prevalent in these areas. So for example, we'll go over some 6 examples. What about way up here in Greenland, way up north by the North Pole? Let's see, is it hot or cold or hot? Well, cold, so it's probably going to be kind of up here in this region. Now, is it wet or dry? Here's the tricky part. It's actually dry. We'll talk more about deserts and things of that nature, but just because there's ice doesn't mean there's a lot of rainfall, all right, or precipitation. Yeah, how much rainfall is there? Not really a lot. So that's why when you're looking at cold up in this area, there's not really wet environments, they're mostly dry. So looking up here, strong mechanical weathering would probably occur up here. So whether it's frost wedging, exfoliation, things of that nature. So come on down. Seattle. Is it hot or cold? Well, maybe kind of in between. Is it wet or dry? Well, most people think it's pretty wet. All right, moderate chemical. So it's kind of in the middle. It gets a lot of rain, you know, there's a lot of days with rain, but most of it is very fine mist. So you get moderate chemical weathering in the Seattle area. What about Denver? Hot or cold? I'm sure most of you are like, oh, it's freezing. Well, it gets pretty warm in the summertime. Wet or dry? Well, it's actually kind of more on the dry side, so you were going to get moderate chemical with some frost action there, because it does get cold. All right, here's one. Come on. This one's an easy one. Phoenix. Cold or hot? Hot. Wet or dry? Dry. It's hot and dry. So we're going to look in this area. Are we right? Yeah, very slight weathering, mainly by wind. If you look at a lot of the rocks around the Phoenix area, you know, they're pretty sharp. They're pretty jagged. They're not really rounded, smoothed, or broken down. You know, so we don't really get a lot of weathering going on. It's too dry for any of that. What we do, wind-blown sediment can break down some rocks. What about Florida? Ugh. Cold or hot? Hot. Dry or wet? Wet. You get this red, strong chemical, for sure. A lot of chemical weathering there. A lot of limestone, as I mentioned in the previous video. So underneath the bedrock of Florida, the rock that makes up the main basement rock of Florida, underneath the dirt, is limestone. So very susceptible to chemical weathering. And then what about Brazil? I forget what city this is. Right on the equator. Hot or cold? Hot. Dry or wet? Wet. Right. Strong chemical weathering. So if you know a little bit about the climate, you can kind of figure out, well, what kind of weathering might be prevalent there. I'll tell you, let's one more part of the super secret code before we stop this video. How about the number 5? You got me? Number 5. One more time, the number 5. So we'll pause there. When we come back, now that we've talked about how things are broken down, we'll talk about those broken down pieces of material called sediment. I'll see you back here in a minute.